Do you find it easy to understand your teacher in a classroom, but you can't understand fast-speaking natives from TV, movies, or YouTube? The best way to fix that is to practice listening to real-world English, and that's what we'll do today. We're going to listen to 3 different native speakers giving helpful tips and advice. And warning, these speakers use both colloquial and advanced vocabulary, and your English is excellent if you can understand these celebrities. Welcome back to J4's English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started. In this lesson, you're going to listen to a short clip of one of the celebrities talking, and you'll listen to that clip 3 times. And you need to complete the missing words. After, I'll explain all the vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation that you need to know. First, we'll listen to Taylor Swift's commencement speech at NYU. Here's the first listening exercise. You'll hear it 3 times.
No matter how hard you try to avoid being cringe, you will look back on your life and cringe retrospectively. No matter how hard you try to avoid being cringe, you will look back on your life and cringe retrospectively. No matter how hard you try to avoid being cringe, you will look back on your life and cringe retrospectively.
How'd you do? She said, no matter how hard you try to avoid being cringe, you will look back on your life and cringe retrospectively. Let's talk about the grammar, because notice avoid, then you have a gerund verb. Avoid being cringe. And of course, to avoid is to stay away from someone or something because it makes you uncomfortable, perhaps. You could say, I've been avoiding. Notice that present perfect continuous is started in the past and continues until now. I've been avoiding speaking English in public because I'm worried about being cringe. Also notice here, you worry about something, a noun, or doing something, speaking in public, the gerund verb, because about is a preposition. You could say, I'm worried about the exam, or a gerund verb, I'm worried about failing the exam. Now let's talk about that word we've used a lot, cringe. This is colloquial, but very commonly used, and it means to behave in a way that causes embarrassment, awkwardness, or discomfort, either to yourself or others.
Oh my god, it was so cringe, wasn't it?
Okay, that is so cringe. That is so cringe. You just don't do that.
So it makes sense you would want to avoid being cringe. Let's look at to look back on your life. If you look back on something, it means you reflect on it. And in this case, your life. Now let's talk about this and cringe. Do you notice something different perhaps? It's the same word, but in this case, it's a verb. So the verb is to cringe. And this is to feel a strong emotional reaction of embarrassment or awkwardness. And we generally show this physically or visibly. What I just did, that is cringe. I just cringed. Here's a real example for you. I cringe when I look back on, when I reflect on my very first YouTube video, which as you can see is maybe a little cringe. So she uses colloquial language and advanced vocabulary retrospectively in the same sentence. So if you do something retrospectively, it means you think about past events. You could say retrospectively, thinking about past events, I wish I had started speaking English much sooner. Another way to say this is in hindsight or looking back. You could also say looking back on it being the situation in the past. So now you have colloquial and advanced vocabulary. Our next listening exercise, you need to complete the sentence with the missing words. You'll hear it 3 times.
Cringe is unavoidable over a lifetime. Even the term cringe might someday be deemed cringe. Cringe is unavoidable over a lifetime. Even the term cringe might someday be deemed cringe. Cringe is unavoidable over a lifetime. Even the term cringe might someday be deemed cringe.
How'd you do? She said cringe is unavoidable over a lifetime. Even the term cringe might someday be deemed cringe. You've certainly heard the word cringe a lot. So let's look at to be deemed something. This is the same as to be regarded as or judged as. So notice all 3 of these use the verb to be. For example, colloquial language is deemed slang by some, maybe you, but natives use it in daily speech in all situations, which is why it's important to learn the most common colloquial language. Now remember, you can use regarded or judged, but you need that preposition as. Colloquial language is regarded as, judged as, slang by some, and the rest is exactly the same. Now notice she used that modal verb, might be deemed. You need your modal plus base verb, which is why we have be, might be deemed. If something might happen, it's saying that it's not certain. There's some doubt. You could say, I might fail, base verb. I might fail my listening exam. That's why these exercises are so important. Our next listening exercise, complete the sentence with the missing words.
You can't avoid it, so don't try to. You can't avoid it, so don't try to. You can't avoid it, so don't try to.
How'd you do? She said, you can't avoid it, so don't try to. Now, what does the it represent in this sentence? The it represents being cringe, because remember, you need that verb in ing. You can use avoid plus noun. You can't avoid the exam, or you use that gerund verb. You talk about the action. You can't avoid taking the exam. I would summarize Taylor's advice to you as embrace being cringe, embrace it. What do you think? Do you agree with that? Put let's go, put let's go in the comments. Now let's move on and listen to Donald Trump respond to a very interesting audience question during the previous presidential debate. And that audience question was, what's one thing you admire about Hillary Clinton? Here are the sentences. You need to complete the missing words. You'll hear it 3 times.
I will say this about Hillary. She doesn't quit. She doesn't give up. I respect that. I tell it like it is. I will say this about Hillary. She doesn't quit. She doesn't give up. I respect that. I tell it like it is. I will say this about Hillary. She doesn't quit. She doesn't give up. I respect that. I tell it like it is.
How did you do? He said, I will say this about Hillary. She doesn't quit. She doesn't give up. I respect that. I tell it like it is. Notice he said, I will. Native speakers will commonly form a contraction and say all. Notice how unstressed that is. All. I'll say this about Hillary. I'll say this. I'll do this. I'll do that. I'll help you. Now this expression, I'll say this about Hillary, this is used to introduce a statement or opinion. Another way of saying this is, here's what I have to say about Hillary. You could say, I'll say this about learning English with native speakers, and then you introduce your opinion. It's a very effective method. Do you think so? If you do, put that's right in the comments. Now let's talk about she doesn't quit, she doesn't give up. So notice here, he used the contracted form, does not, doesn't. Repeat after me, doesn't, doesn't. Now let's talk about quit and give up, because they can be interchangeable, but they can also have different meanings. It depends on context. Quit means to leave a position, such as your job, or to stop something permanently, such as learning English. So in terms of a position, you may know that Joe Biden quit the presidential race. He left it permanently. Now, if you've had enough of your boss and working overtime without pay, you can say, I quit. You're permanently leaving that position. Now, give up means that you surrender, you lose hope. So you stop doing something, you quit because you surrender or lose hope. So you could say, I've been trying to improve my listening skills for years. I give up. So in this case, it means you're no longer going to try. You've just lost all hope that is possible for you. You could also say, I've been trying to improve my listening skills for years. Maybe I should just quit. You could continue on and specify the something. I should just quit learning English. But if it's implied and obvious, you don't need to say it. Your friend could respond back, or I would respond back and say, don't quit, don't give up. So here, although different vocabulary, it means the same thing. Keep going. Don't quit, don't give up. You just need to subscribe to J4's English. So make sure you subscribe. Now let's talk about I respect that. What does that represent here? I respect Hillary's determination, her persistence. Those are the adjectives we can use to describe someone who doesn't quit, who doesn't give up. Those are the nouns we can use to describe the fact that she doesn't quit, she doesn't give up. Hillary's determination, she is determined. Hillary's persistence, she is persistent. You could say she keeps going despite setbacks. Or you could say she keeps going despite facing challenges, because you can use despite with a noun or a gerund. And setbacks and challenges, they represent the same thing. Now let's talk about I tell it like it is. This is a colloquial way of saying I'm being straightforward. I'm being honest, I'm being direct. This is often used before offering an area of improvement in a direct, perhaps harsh way. So I could say to you, your accent needs improving. I'm sorry, but I tell it like it is. I'm being 100% honest, direct, even if it might hurt your feelings. There's another word to describe this, which is to be blunt. So when you're blunt, it means you're very honest, even if it might offend someone or hurt someone's feelings. To be blunt, your accent needs improving. So you can use to be blunt at the very beginning, and then you offer critical feedback. So let's summarize Trump's advice. Don't quit, don't give up. What do you think about that? If you agree, if you're not going to quit or give up, then put let's go in the comments. Now let's move on and listen to Oprah Winfrey's commencement speech at Harvard. Here's the sentence. You need to complete the missing words. You'll hear it 3 times.
There is no such thing as failure. Failure is just life trying to move us in another direction. There is no such thing as failure. Failure is just life trying to move us in another direction. There is no such thing as failure. Failure is just life trying to move us in another direction.
Did you get this one? She said, there is no such thing as failure. Failure is just life trying to move us in another direction. We can form a contraction between there is and say theirs. Repeat after me, theirs, theirs. There's no such thing as. This means something doesn't exist or something isn't real. So said another way, failure doesn't exist. Using that contraction, does not. Failure doesn't exist. Failure isn't, is not. Failure isn't real. There's no such thing as perfect English. This is something I commonly say to my students. Said another way, perfect English doesn't exist. So don't worry about making mistakes. Native speakers make them too. Next, failure is just life trying to move us in another direction. So notice here, failure is, you could form a contraction, especially in spoken English, and say failures. Failures just life. Now, native speakers commonly link our sounds together. So you could see this with move us in. It may sound like one word, move us in, move us in. Repeat after me, move us in. Now, move us in another direction. There's a very common expression to go in another direction. And this means to change your approach or plan. For example, I was going to enroll in a language school, but I went in another direction. I changed my plan, I changed my approach. And I subscribed to J Forest English. So let's summarize Oprah's advice. Failure doesn't exist. Do you agree with that? If you do, put that's right, put that's right in the comments. And if you keep doing exercises like this, you're going to improve your listening skills and sound like a native in no time. If you like this lesson, make sure you hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And you can keep improving your listening skills with this lesson. Watch it right now.